At the beginning of the film, we see Mark preparing for a journey to take his wife to her parents' home. Nina is concerned about her parents, given the dangerous state of the world with many criminal gangs roaming around looking for food to survive. Mark has been warned by a friend not to undertake the journey because it is very unsafe outside. If Mark and Nina are captured, the gangs could turn Mark into food and use Nina as a slave. However, Mark is determined to get his wife to her parents' place. The next day, Mark and Nina are ready to travel to Milwaukee. Unexpectedly, their garage is visited by 4 members of a gang who stop by briefly to rest. Their presence is detected by one of the gang members, but the gang members are soon killed by another gang. Mark and Nina seize the opportunity to escape. After traveling a long distance, they find a large house and decide to rest there. Mark and Nina search for supplies they can use for their long journey. In the house, they also discover 2 bodies, the owners of the house, who were gruesomely tortured by the gangs. Nina contacts her parents to ensure they are safe, while Mark handles the bodies of the house owners. That night, they rest without doing anything unnecessary to keep their stamina up for the next day's journey. The next morning, Mark was shocked to see 2 gang members heading towards the house they were staying in. Mark immediately told Nina to hide so she wouldn't fall victim to the gang's brutality. One of the gang members found a strand of Nina's hair on the sofa in the room as they began searching for them. Mark then hid to launch a stealth attack. Mark managed to eliminate the gang members and quickly continued their journey to their destination. Mark and Nina eventually stopped at a convenience store to find some food for the journey. Suddenly, a man appeared and greeted them very warmly. This man was named Nathan. While they were chatting and getting to know each other, a gang member who had been following Mark and Nina entered the convenience store. They hid while continuing their conversation in the warehouse. The gang members were then instantly killed by a barrage of gunfire from an unknown source, which turned out to be shots from Stephen, Nathan's son. Mark and Nina were invited by Nathan to have dinner at his home. While waiting for the gangsters to disperse and stop pursuing them, Mark and Nina met Nathan's family, and they had dinner together in the evening. There was a warm conversation among them, and as Nathan and his wife danced, it was clear that Mark and Nina were very awkward. It turned out that Mark and Nina's relationship was in very bad shape, and they were planning to divorce. However, due to the massacre, they were unable to divorce because the family court had been closed permanently. Mark and Nina remained legally married. After dinner, Nathan had cleared the dishes while chatting. Mark told Nathan that he was tired of dry food during the chaotic times, and that this was the first time he had eaten meat. Nathan replied that the meat they were eating was human flesh because animals had become extinct due to the food crisis. Mark was shocked and wanted to leave Nathan's house with Nina immediately because he thought they wouldn't be safe there. However, Nathan restrained him and threatened that he would be killed if he caused any trouble in his house. Meanwhile, Nina and Nathan's wife greeted them very warmly. Suddenly, a gangster who had been following Mark managed to enter the house while holding Nathan's youngest child hostage. During the commotion, Nathan's wife and daughter were shot, and Mark and Nina managed to escape to save themselves. As they were traveling, it turned out that gang members were still monitoring them and attempted to shoot them. Nina was hit by a bullet from the gangsters. Panicking, Mark quickly changed direction and fled to a safe place. Meanwhile, Nathan contacted one of the local gangs to hunt down Mark and Nina. He did this out of anger over the death of his wife and daughter, caused by the gang that was pursuing Mark and Nina. When the gang leader was about to inform his men, he was shocked to find that all his men had been killed by a woman named Betsy. Betsy is a hunter who frees women held captive by gangs and often exploited. Long story short, Mark and Nina stopped at a house in the woods. Nina realized she had a gunshot wound on her shoulder and decided to remove her wedding ring, feeling ready to divorce Mark. Meanwhile, Mark went to find food at a house near their location. When he entered the house, he found 2 people being held hostage, Nathan and Stephen. They were being held by a man named William. William told Mark that Nathan and his son were still tracking them and gave Mark a choice: kill Nathan and his son with a razor blade, or a large man who was one of William's men would beat him to death. While Mark was in danger, Nina, who was once a devoted wife, now felt anxious and wanted to listen to music. Betsy suddenly appeared to keep an eye on Nina to ensure nothing happened to her, while Mark was being beaten by the large man for refusing to kill Nathan and his son. In a turning point, Mark seized an opportunity and managed to kill William with his pistol, freeing Nathan and his son from captivity. Nathan apologized to Mark for his grudge, and Mark also freed William's men who had previously punched him. Nathan started acknowledging that Mark was good and smart man. When Mark returned, Mark began practicing shooting to be prepared if they encountered hungry gangsters again. Nina joined the practice so she wouldn't be a burden in future confrontations. After the practice, Nina took Mark to a warehouse in the yard. There, Betsy was seen following them. While Mark and Nina went into the warehouse, Betsy searched the house and found a wedding ring left behind by Nina. The focus now shifts to Mark and Nina, who have arrived inside the warehouse. It turns out that Nina showed Mark that their favorite car was there. They both got into the car and reminisced about their past due to the nostalgic atmosphere. And they then shared a romantic moment together. But the gangsters suddenly discovered them. Mark and Nina were taken to the gang's headquarters. Once at the headquarters, they were registered with the intention of being put into a fighting arena. After the registration, they were forced into the arena and made to hold pistols pointed at each other. Since they initially refused, the gangsters secured their grip by driving screws into their wrists. A bookmaker started taking bets from all the gang members on the shootout between Mark and Nina, with the condition that they would be freed if they managed to survive 2 rounds. In the first round, Mark and Nina were very fortunate because the pistol used contained empty shells. They entered the second round, where Mark was hit by a bullet, causing Nina to panic greatly. She struggled to free her hands from the restraints. Once her hands were free, Nina grabbed a pistol from the bookmaker's pocket and shot him. She used this moment to escape the room while carrying the injured Mark. Outside, there were 2 gangsters on guard. These gangsters were instantly killed by shots from Betsy, who was shooting from a distance. Panicking, Nina quickly accelerated and fled from the area to avoid the gangsters. Nina and Mark continued their journey to Nina's parents' hometown in Milwaukee. Upon arrival, Mark was treated while Nina met with the neighbors. Nina learned that her parents had passed away during her journey to Milwaukee. She felt deeply saddened for not being there with her parents when they died. In short, Nina and the neighbors talked about the safety of their area. The locals assured Nina that their place was quite safe, but they should stay alert if any gang members attacked. During this conversation, an elderly man named Phil, who was a close relative of Nina's father, arrived. Meanwhile, Betsy managed to infiltrate the area and continued to track Mark and Nina's movements. The focus then shifts as Nina is preparing food. She notices Phil outside her house, using a radio to communicate. It turns out Phil is contacting the gangsters to report that Mark and Nina are in the area, as she is suspicious. Nina secretly follows Phil to his house and quickly deduces that Phil has contacted the gangsters. She prepares her weapons to face the gangsters, while Betsy takes up a position since she is close to the gang's hideout. A battle erupts between Nina, Mark, Betsy, and the gangsters. During the fight, Mark is attacked stealthily but manages to defeat the gangster. Betsy sustains a gunshot wound that renders her unable to continue fighting. Suddenly, a truck from other gang members arrives to attack them all. Nina quickly activates anti-tank mines that had been set up by the locals the previous day. The truck attack kills many of the gangsters pursuing Nina and Mark, leaving only 1 survivor from the attack. Next, we see Mark sitting in pain from his injuries. Betsy appears before Mark and hands over the wedding ring that Nina had left behind at the house they once stayed in. It turns out that Betsy followed them only to return the wedding ring to Mark so that he and his wife could stay together and build a happy family. Betsy can be seen as a good person. However, suddenly Betsy's head is blown off by a remaining gangster. The female gangster comes to execute Mark. But suddenly Nina arrives and shoots her, as she realizes there is still a living gangster. Nina then goes to Phil's house, where she discovers that Phil has been killed, with his stomach torn open. In the end, Nina returns to find Mark sitting quietly in her parents' house. He puts the wedding ring back on Nina's finger. On the same day, finally, Mark and Nina continue their journey to the place they dreamed of, and the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.